The sharp noise from my home security system startled me awake at 3 o'clock in the morning. I hurried out of bed, grabbed my phone, and opened the app to find out what had triggered the alarm. The video showed my automatic gate sliding open with no one visible nearby. My pulse quickened as I saw the gate stay open for exactly 90 seconds before closing again. This was not a glitch. Someone had intentionally accessed and reprogrammed my custom security gate, the very one I had designed and built myself. I am John Reynolds, a 42-year-old software engineer focused on security systems. After 2 decades working for top technology firms, I had saved enough to buy my dream house in Oak Ridge Estates, a charming neighborhood with tree-lined streets and breathtaking mountain vistas. The property included a private driveway with a custom electronic gate I created using advanced security technology. It was my pride and joy, a perfect fusion of design and innovation that harmonized with the natural stone walls surrounding my estate. What I did not realize when I bought the house 2 years ago was that I was entering the territory of Susan Winters, the self-declared queen of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. Susan was in her mid-50s with flawlessly highlighted blonde hair that never seemed out of place, wearing designer outfits that felt excessive for neighborhood gatherings, always carrying a constant air of contempt for anything that failed to meet her exacting standards. Her role as the HOA president was far more than a mere title. It defined who she was, giving her purpose and a sense of power she wielded much like a medieval sovereign. After watching the security footage several times, I grabbed a jacket and stepped outside to examine my gate. The crisp autumn breeze carried the scent of pine trees as I walked down my driveway with a flashlight in hand. When I arrived at the control box, my fears were confirmed. Someone had forced it open and tampered with the system. The protective cover bore scratch marks where it had been pried apart, and the programming port had been accessed, as if they were searching for something. A voice suddenly broke my concentration, making me spin around to see my neighbor George standing at the edge of his yard. At 78 years old, George was one of the earliest residents of Oak Ridge Estates, having lived there since the community began in 1972. He wore a flannel robe and slippers, his white hair tousled from sleep. I told him, "Someone's been messing with my gate, shining my light on the control box." George's worn face stiffened as he replied, "I saw them earlier this evening, Susan and 2 men from the association's Architectural Compliance Committee. They had some kind of gadget." When I asked what they were doing, Susan told me they were carrying out an authorized security inspection. Anger started to rise within me. They certainly had no permission from me. George scoffed and said, "Susan doesn't think she needs anyone's approval for anything in this neighborhood. That's always how it has been. Ever since Susan moved in and took control of the HOA a decade ago, she forced her way into the presidency and has held on tightly ever since." I thanked George for the details and headed back to my house, my thoughts spinning. This was not mere trespassing, it was a breach of my security system and possibly an invasion of my privacy. I spent the entire evening examining exactly what had been altered in my gate's programming. The intruders had reset the entry codes and created a new master code that would let them open my gate at any time they desired. They had also turned off the alert system that would normally notify me when the gate was accessed remotely. The changes were crude but functional. Whoever was responsible had enough knowledge about electronic gates to pose a real threat, yet not sufficient skill to erase their tracks from someone like me who actually designs security systems. I carefully recorded everything, taking photos and saving the logs that showed exactly when the interference happened. At exactly 8 o'clock the following morning, my doorbell rang. I opened it to see Susan Winters standing on my porch, dressed in a cream-colored pantsuit that likely cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. Behind her were 2 men in polo shirts embroidered with the Oak Ridge Estates HOA emblem. Her devoted enforcers, Michael Cooper and David Simmons, both retired professionals with time to kill, were there to carry out Susan's wishes and enforce her vision of suburban life. Perfection. "Good morning, Mr. Reynolds," Susan said with a smile that failed to reach her eyes. "I am here to talk about your gate." I leaned against the door frame, deliberately blocking their way inside. "You mean the gate you tampered with unlawfully last night?" Susan's smile briefly wavered before returning with even greater intensity. "There appears to be a misunderstanding. As president of Oakage Estates Homeowners Association, I am authorized to inspect and ensure compliance of all exterior fixtures, including gates. Your gate's appearance and the noise it produces have triggered numerous complaints." "Really? Complaints from whom?" I asked. "The information is confidential," Michael interrupted, adjusting his glasses. "Crucially, homeowner complaints are protected under HOA privacy rules." I pulled out my phone and showed them the security footage. "What is not confidential is this video of you trespassing on my property and messing with my security system at 2:15 this morning." "That is trespassing and vandalism, maybe even breaking and entering." David stepped forward, a thin man with a permanent scowl. "Now listen here. The HOA bylaws clearly state the association has the right to access and fix any external feature violating community standards. Show me exactly where in the bylaws it says you can break into someone's security system in the middle of the night," I challenged, watching Susan's face harden as her friendly mask disappeared. "Your gate violates 3 distinct sections of our community guidelines. The color does not match the approved palette. The design fails to align with the neighborhood's aesthetic, and the operational noise surpasses our allowed decibel limits. Over the past 6 months, we have sent you 4 notices. This was the first time I heard about any of them, but I was not surprised." Susan had a reputation for claiming she sent documents that never actually reached their destination, then using the supposed lack of response as grounds for immediate action. "Even if that were accurate," I said calmly, "it does not give you permission to unlawfully interfere with my property. I have recorded everything and contacted both the police and my lawyer this morning." Susan's professionally managed smile completely vanished. "You clearly do not understand how things function in Oakage Estates, Mr. Reynolds. The HOA exists to protect property values and uphold community standards. Your unwillingness to cooperate is disappointing. What is truly disappointing is your assumption that you have the right to break into private property," I responded. "Unless you have a warrant or court order, kindly leave my premises immediately." As they moved down my driveway, Susan glanced back and said, "The Architectural Compliance Committee will vote on your violations next week. I suggest you rethink your stance before you face substantial fines." Once they left, I reset my gate with new programming. Advanced security measures were implemented along with extra cameras covering every possible entry point. I then spent the following 2 hours on calls, first reaching out to the local law enforcement to file a report, and then contacting my lawyer, Susan Chen, a sharp property law expert who had supported numerous homeowners dealing with HOA conflicts. Susan confirmed they had clearly crossed the line once she heard my account. Homeowners associations do hold certain rights related to exterior appearances, but interfering with a security system violates multiple legal standards. I asked her what would be the best way to proceed. She recommended documenting everything meticulously, collecting witness statements, preserving all videos and photos, and thoroughly reviewing the HOA bylaws. She also emphasized checking the property deed and any easements, as there might be protections or grandfather clauses that override HOA rules. I spent the remainder of the day following her advice, beginning with a visit to George Jenkins. He was eager to give a written statement about what he had observed. While we talked on his porch, he shared an intriguing detail. "You know, this is not the first time Susan has pulled something like this." George said, sipping his tea. The previous year, she had the committee inspect Michael Miller's solar panels set up while he was away on vacation. When he returned, they had completely disconnected it, claiming it was not compliant with regulations. "What happened then?" I asked. George smiled. "Michael is a retired electrical engineer. I had recorded everything and proved the system had been expertly set up and authorized. I was prepared to take legal action against both the HOA and Susan personally. They backed off, but Susan has held a grudge against me ever since. This gave me an idea. I thanked George and went straight to James Miller's house on the opposite side of the neighborhood. When I explained my situation, James invited me inside right away, his eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Oh, she's gone from just cutting off connections to actually tampering with programming now," he said, shaking his head. "That woman's need for control is only getting worse." James, a lively 70-year-old with sharp eyes, pulled out a thick folder titled HOA Tyranny and placed it on his dining room table. After my own run-in with her, I began gathering proof of all her abuses, statements from neighbors, copies of unfair violation notices, documentation of biased rule enforcement, anything I could find. As we sifted through his files, a clear trend appeared. Susan repeatedly singled out new homeowners who made upgrades to their properties, especially those with technical or security features she didn't understand. She also seemed to target people in tech jobs or those who hadn't attended her Welcome to the Neighborhood events. "She's obsessed with control," James explained. "If she can't understand or dominate something, she looks for a way to destroy it." By the end of the week, I had collected statements from 6 people. Several homeowners who encountered similar disturbances caused by Susan and her team shared their experiences with me. I also carefully examined the HOA regulations, which clearly contained no clauses that permitted interference with security equipment or entry onto private property without clear authorization, regardless of any supposed breaches. While I gathered evidence to support my argument, Susan was actively running her own campaign. Numerous residents mentioned that she went door to door, displaying images of my gate and asserting it posed a danger to the neighborhood because it might block emergency responders, despite the fact that the gate was programmed to open automatically for any emergency vehicle transponder. The matter intensified when I received an official letter from the HOA notifying me that an urgent meeting had been called to address what they described as my multiple serious violations, with fines of $200 per day set to start immediately. The letter also demanded that I replace my custom gate with one approved by the association within 2 weeks or face further penalties. I was ready for this situation. Sarah had guided me on how to reply, not through the HOA as a whole, but by sending a precisely crafted legal letter to each board member separately. The letter explained the illegality of Susan's behavior and warned them about their personal responsibility should they continue endorsing her wrongful actions. On the eve of the emergency meeting, I took one final step to prepare. I devoted several hours to updating the software controlling my gate's functions. A special feature was included, one that would turn out to be extremely important in the upcoming confrontation. The emergency meeting took place at the Oakage Estates Community Center, a modest building with plain white walls and uncomfortable folding chairs. I arrived early, setting up my laptop and linking it to the room's projection system with assistance from the caretaker, who watched my preparations with a bemused expression. "Planning to put on a show for the Dragon Lady?" he asked with a grin. "Oh, something like that," I responded. The room filled quickly. Susan sat at the front table with the other 4 board members, all appearing uneasy. Michael and David positioned themselves like sentinels on either side of the room. I recognized several homeowners whose statements I had previously gathered, including James and George, who gave me encouraging nods. Susan called the meeting to order by sharply striking her gavel. "We are here today to discuss the ongoing violations by homeowner John Reynolds concerning his non-compliant gate installation and his refusal to cooperate with the Architectural Compliance Committee's efforts to resolve the issue." She then delivered a rehearsed speech about community standards and property values, explaining that my gate was not only unattractive but also posed a potential safety risk. As she spoke, I noticed several board members shifting uncomfortably in their seats. It seemed my letters about personal liability had made an impact. The issue clearly touched a nerve. Moreover, Susan stated that Mr. Reynolds had made baseless accusations against HOA officials who were simply carrying out their responsibilities. The board is now set to vote on the suggested daily fine schedule, along with a compulsory replacement order. "Before casting your votes," I said as I rose to my feet, "I would like to share some important information." Susan's perfectly aligned lips formed a tight smile. "This is not a forum for discussion, Mr. Reynolds. This vote concerns violations that have already been recorded. Actually, board member Elizabeth Chen, a recent addition to the community, interrupted. I believe homeowners should have the opportunity to provide evidence before any decisions regarding fines or compliance orders are made. It is stated in the bylaws, Section 4.3. Susan could not refute a direct citation from the bylaws, an argument she often used now turned against her. She nodded briefly. "You have 5 minutes." I moved to the front of the room and linked my laptop to the projector. "Thank you. I will begin with the security footage from the night of October 12th. The large screen displayed clear images of Susan Michael and David approaching my gate at 2:15 in the morning using some sort of electronic tool to forcibly open the control panel and spending nearly 20 minutes tampering with the system. This clearly breaches California Penal Code sections 459 concerning criminal trespass and 594 regarding tampering with private property," I explained. "I filed a police report which—" Susan's expression remained emotionless, yet her knuckles turned pale as she clutched her pen tightly. "As I had already mentioned, the HOA has the right to inspect and address violations." "Interesting that you mention that," I said, switching the display to highlight certain sections of the HOA bylaws. "According to your own rules, and I quote, association members must issue written notice at least 72 hours before inspecting private property, and such inspections must occur during daylight with the owner's consent or presence." Soft murmurs spread among the audience while I continued presenting evidence I had gathered from other homeowners who faced similar intrusions, James's records of repeated harassment patterns, and finally a letter from my lawyer detailing the possible personal liability faced by board members who intentionally allowed illegal actions. "But the most compelling part," I said, changing the screen once more, "shows what happened when you interfered with my gate." A new video appeared portraying a complex technical diagram of the gate's control system. "I am a security systems engineer," I explained. "I don't just use these systems, I create them. The gate you meddled with was custom-built by me, along with its firmware and security protocols." Susan's face went pale as she grasped the direction this was taking. "When you accessed my system, it wasn't just basic entry you gained. The controls activated a secondary security protocol that logged everything, each keystroke, every access code entered, and all alterations made. Additionally, it captured images from all security cameras, embedding time-stamped watermarks. I clicked to the following slide, which displayed lines of code alongside pictures of Susan instructing Michael as he interfered with the control panel. What is even more intriguing is this. I continued to emphasize a particular segment. The device you utilized to reach my system sent its own identifier. It is registered to Oak Ridge Estates HOA, acquired with association funds, but the user profile is personally linked to you, Susan. The room fell utterly silent at this point. Even Michael and David glanced at Susan with growing dread. In essence, I concluded that you exploited HOA resources for a personal vendetta, executing an unauthorized action that breaches both HOA rules and state law, all recorded by the very system you tried to hack. Susan finally managed to speak. She said, "This is absurd. You have tampered with the evidence. The board won't be fooled by your technological tricks and illusions." Elizabeth Chen cleared her throat. "I specialize in digital forensics, Susan. I can confirm that this evidence seems genuine and would probably be accepted in court." Another board member, Robert Washington, a retired judge, nodded in agreement. "I have seen enough. I propose that we immediately dismiss all alleged violations against—" Mr. Reynolds called for a thorough audit of the Architectural Compliance Committee's actions over the previous year. Susan's face turned bright red. "You cannot do that. I am the president of this association and must follow the same rules as everyone else," David responded firmly. "I also propose that we put all compliance measures initiated by Susan on hold until a full investigation is completed." The vote was swift and clear, 4 in favor and 1 against, with only Susan dissenting. The meeting ended with Susan storming out, leaving Michael and David looking directionless without their leader. In the weeks that followed, the Homeowners Association experienced significant change. The audit uncovered numerous instances where Susan had overstepped her authority, selectively applied rules against those she disliked, and even misused association funds for her own expenses. She was removed from her position as president and ultimately resigned from the board when faced with potential legal challenges from several homeowners. A new board was elected, headed by James Miller as president, promising transparent and fair leadership. Strict aesthetic guidelines were relaxed, allowing more individuality while maintaining sensible community standards. My gate stayed exactly as I had designed it, now standing as a sign of the neighborhood's freedom from Susan's rule. Half a year later, I hosted a neighborhood barbecue in my backyard. As I watched George Jenkins, I was talking with Elizabeth Chen's children while James was explaining the efficiency of solar panels to several interested homeowners. I could not shake the feeling that something significant had shifted in Oakage Estates. The neighborhood had evolved from a group of isolated residents, fearful of violation notices, into genuine neighbors who cared for one another. The automatic gate at the entrance to my driveway opened smoothly as another neighbor arrived. Its operation was quiet and effective, just as I had engineered it. The irony struck me that Susan's efforts to control my property had ultimately resulted in her losing the control she valued most. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over meticulously kept lawns and uniquely tended gardens, I realized that sometimes standing up to a bully transforms not only your own circumstances, but an entire community. Susan had unwittingly interfered with something far more important than my gate's firmware. She had activated a reset of the neighborhood's values and connections programming, replacing it with something far better. The most rewarding part was that she never realized what hit her until it was too late. Sometimes the greatest victory is not just winning, but winning by understanding the system better than those who try to exploit it.